This video demonstrates the process of finding the optimal targeting rule used in behavioral targeting with the logit choice model. It is intended for students of marketing analytics, marketing/DSO 566. We use the example from class of the American Express with the Amex data. The data has been given to you, and using that data file, we have the estimation sample and the holdout sample. There are 200 responses in each of these respective samples, and we want to estimate on the estimation data. So using our MEXL logit choice, we click for first column contains respondent ID, that's here, leaving all other default options. And we enter the data using the variable headers and respondent IDs, entering all 200 responses. Our only interest in the output is in the segment tab, namely these 4 estimates, or coefficient estimates. We take those coefficient estimates into a new spreadsheet, which I have already created here. So I conveniently enter the logit coefficients in the top row. This first one is female, second is the coefficient for travel spending, food spending, and then the brand specific coefficient. We import our holdout data with responses in these first 5 columns. You can see the orders preserved, respondent 201 to 400. We're going to use this tab and this spreadsheet to make a decile evaluator. This decile evaluator is going to be used in the profit simulation. To get the decile evaluator, we need to score our responses and calculate hit rates. And I'll explain that now, and then later I will demonstrate the use of the decile calculator for the profit simulation. To do the scoring, we calculate the utility score based on our estimates and the individual respondents' characteristics. So it's female times coefficient, travel spend times coefficient, food spend times coefficient, plus the specific coefficient. We use that utility to calculate the logit score, which is simply e to this utility over 1 plus e to the same utility. This is our logit score. Hit rate is simply the number of cumulative responses. So we tally downwards down the column this way by counting the number of ones that occur in response in column E, keeping track as we go along. So for example, in the second row we take the first plus any response in column E, and so on down. This keeps track of the cumulative responses in absolute terms. We put this on a percentage scale in the neighboring column, dividing by 34, which is the number of total responses in the holdout, which is tallied at the bottom of the responses in your spreadsheet, 34 here. Just the sum of the responses. We have our total mailings here. So for every, there's 200 in the sample, every 1 out of 200 is a mailing, so that's 0.5% for 1, and each increment down. That's our hit rate. To do the decile evaluator, now we could choose 5 percentile, 1 percentile. The reason I chose 10% or decile is it involves only a calculation of 10 calculations and makes it manageable to see on one screen. It doesn't give the most resolution or fine degree or fine grid for the simulation, but it illustrates the process. So the percent mailing is simply, we start with 10%, we go to 20%, and so on. And then the percent response is calculated by counting the first 10% of responses over the total, which is 34. So it's just a count of the first 20. 20 is 10% of the sample, and the number of ones in that column. And the percent response after hitting 20% of the market with our promotion. This is counting the first 40 in our sample here. Now if you notice, these are ordered by the respondent numbers, which is not a very useful targeting tool. So to see how good our targeting rule is with Logit, we order based on the Logit scores. So we highlight just the responses, respondents, and their scores only, not the hit rate. We don't sort on these. We keep these fixed. Data, sort. If you've included the variables here, the variable headers, my data has headers, you could pick Logit, smallest to largest. No, we want largest to smallest. It sorts, and we see the decile evaluator change. And in fact, it looks pretty good. With the first 10%, with the highest probability of response, we get 38% of the total sales. So it's this decile evaluator that shows us how good our targeting is. We're getting close to 100% of sales just with 40% of our mailings. Now that we have a decile evaluator, we can do the profit simulation by taking these response rates to the profit model. So basically cut and paste the decile evaluator here on the left. And in the right here is the calculations for profit at each level. Now this decile evaluator here has not been updated since we resorted. We'll do that later. For now, let's figure out how to calculate each of these entries into the profit calculator. Now alongside here is the random as a benchmark against the Logit. We start with number of mailings. Now here are our, in the top part of the screen, in the first 4 rows are the simulation parameters. We have the market potential, we have the total market size, revenue per accept, and cost per mailing. The total market size is assumed to be 1,000. Okay. We know from the holdout sample that 34 out of 200 responded to the promotion. So we make that same assumption for the total market, which is 17%. And then the cost and revenue has been assumed at 260 respectively. So the number of mailings is just 10% of the 1,000 we're sending out, which is 100. Be sure to use the $sign to indicate a fixed cell. The Logit is the number of units sold with the Logit scoring. Now this is not Logit, but we will substitute Logit in here in a moment. Random is just the percent mailing times the portion of sales we would get. 17% or 17% times 1,000 times 10% gives us 17. The cost of mailing is the number of mailings times 60. The revenue is the number of units sold times the 200. With random, number of units sold times 200. Oops, that should be. Profit is the revenue less cost for both random and Logit. Okay. Those are our entries for the profit simulator. We copy and paste throughout each column. Okay. Now if you notice, these percent response do not correspond to our logit because we resorted. We did not update this percent response. This is actually the sorting on respondent numbers, which is arbitrary and not useful. So we go back to the decile evaluator, we copy and paste here. Paste values only. So the percent response updates, and again we're hitting almost 100% only with 40% of the mailings. But we don't want to go that far. To choose our targeting rule, look that we maximize profits with logit scoring at 11,000. Now this is not unique, but I'm going to choose this 11,000, which corresponds to a percent response or hit rate of 85%. To figure out the probability that breaks us even, or rather maximizes profit, we go back to the hit rate evaluator and look for 85.3% in the hit rate. So we scroll down in this hit rate. I'm going to freeze the pane so you can see. So I'm looking at hit rate. We go to 85.3%. That corresponds to row 62. And at row 62, we have 11% probability. So what this means is that the 85th percent person who buys, or the 85th of the total market who buys, their probability is 11% of buying. If we go higher than that, probably it's too low to make it worthwhile to send them a promotion package. If we go less than that, then we're missing out on that last person who would possibly buy. So again, we estimate coefficients here from the estimation sample. We borrow the holdout sample, fix it here in a new spreadsheet. We calculate the scores. We derive hit rates at each incremental mailing, and we compute the decile evaluator in terms of responses. We sort based on logit score so that the highest is on top. We take the decile evaluator results and put it in the profit model. We calculate profit at each decile targeting, look for the optimal profit, the corresponding percent response, go back to the hit evaluator, find the hit rate and the corresponding probability. With this score, we target anybody whose calculated utility, or rather logit score, exceeds 0.11. This concludes the demonstration of optimal cutoff rule in behavioral targeting.